Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Just so you know, we do have a Instagram now, so you can keep posted on what we are doing and what we are reading of the week or the month. Untangle Your Anxiety, Chapter 8. When discussing the writing of this book, we talked about some really cool ways to deal with anxiety attacks, and we'll share them with you in this part of the book. An anxiety or panic attack is when we are flooded with adrenaline in response to stress or an external stressor. Importantly, nothing is actually attacking us, but for some reason, the hyperbolic name has been given because lots of adrenaline can be uncomfortable and overwhelming. The difference between your usual anxiety and experiencing an anxiety attack is when we experience a rush of fear included adrenaline, but it catches us off guard and we get confused. Then we misinterpret this as something bigger than it is. An anxiety attack occurs because of the confusion and misinterpretation that can occur around the unexpected dump of harmless adrenaline. A lot of people then start to feel like they are losing control in some way because of the fear response becomes intense and seems overwhelming. Fear not, though, you cannot lose control just because of adrenaline. The mind then starts to race faster than we can keep up with, flooding our minds with thoughts of what if thoughts that almost seem immediately replaced one with another. What if I lose my mind? What if I'm having a heart attack? What if I lose control? What if this is something more than anxiety? What if this is an undiagnosed physical or psychiatric problem? Then, to make things even more uncomfortable, we then experience the physical sensation that all the adrenaline and cortisol seems to create. There are many physical symptoms associated with anxiety attacks, but the most common are a state of derealization, unreality, pounding and or a rapid heartbeat, struggling to catch breath, nausea, dizzy or lightheaded, muscle tension, particularly in the chest, jaw, and shoulders, and sweating hot flushes. So actually, anxiety attacks are a mixture of 3 different components: your emotions, your thoughts, and your sensations. Interestingly, each anxiety attack can present in different ways. Sometimes your heart rate will be rapid, sometimes you won't experience derealization, and other times you may feel flushed and nauseous, but experience nothing else. What is always present during an anxiety attack is fear. Adrenaline rush, not a panic attack. We spoke about cognitive reframing earlier, but one of the best reframes we advise is to change the term panic attack or anxiety attack to adrenaline rush or adrenaline flood. Not only does this sound less scary, but it is actually more accurate. Remember, the 3 components of anxiety attack are primarily down to adrenaline. This includes the racing thoughts, the strange sensations, and the overarching feeling of fear and doom. Hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, but just experiencing the discomfort of an adrenaline rush at the moment. My mind is racing, my heart is beating fast, my stomach isn't 100%, and I feel quite vulnerable. But it is just an adrenaline and it will pass soon. Let's carry on. Psychoeducation is so important when it comes to empowering ourselves and building confidence to practice willful tolerance of anxiety. A really useful part of an anxious response is to learn about is the involuntary nervous system and how it relates to us experiencing anxiety. The involuntary nervous system is part of our nervous system that runs through our body and is connected to all our vital organs. It keeps our body running in the background and is responsible for our breathing, our heartbeat, our blood pressure regulation, blood sugar, etc. A lot of anxious people share with us that they often get frightened when their breathing becomes labored and they can't quite catch their breath. However, we reassure them that they're not actually in charge of their breath, and they couldn't stop breathing if they tried. Ultimately, the involuntary nervous system is in charge of keeping our bodies in balance, and it does a remarkable job of doing this. Here's where the involuntary system plays a huge part with anxiety. In order to understand this better, we learn about the 2 major components: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system responsible for engaging our fight, flight, or freeze response. This is the part of our nervous system that can dictate by the amygdala and it's responsible for activating fear and adrenaline. It is also responsible for keeping us on edge by being involved in the process of releasing cortisol to keep our hypervigilant and on alert for danger. When we are stressed, we engage the sympathetic nervous system to get through a stressful event, whether this be stress at work, a breakup, grief, social worries, to name a few. This is okay. Basically, too much stress or too much sympathetic activation can confuse the brain into thinking we are in danger. The amygdala can't not distinguish between the actual threat and the threat caused by stress, so adds more adrenaline just in case we were in danger. This is how a lot of anxiety disorders start. The parasympathetic nervous system. This is the other part of the involuntary nervous system and is responsible for the rest, relaxation, and digestion. The parasympathetic nervous system is activated when we are resting, socializing, being mindful, distracted by something engaging, sleeping and laughing. It's basically the fun part of the nervous system. Although to a lot of people, the adrenaline rushes can be fun too. The key here is to remember that our involuntary nervous systems need balance. Also, when it comes to anxiety attacks, it is helpful to acknowledge that they occur because the sympathetic nervous system has been overworked and are tired. When this occurs, the sympathetic nervous system becomes hypersensitive, ready to release adrenaline, dumps out the slightest sign of danger, distress, or shock. Everyone with an anxiety condition has a hypersensitive nervous system. However, during the anxiety attack, don't put too much emphasis on trying to relax through it. This is almost impossible. The reason why we feel it is helpful to know about the nervous system is to demystify and any mystery around why we experience a panic attack. Oh wow, I'm feeling an adrenaline rush. I must have been stressed recently, and I know I still have a little bit of lingering fear of anxiety. This is okay. This is just adrenaline, and all these feelings and sensations will pass. When they do, I'll make sure to engage my parasympathetic nervous system in order to bring balance back to my body. Stop trying to resist and fix. When you feel the onset of an anxiety attack, the biggest mistake we can make is to start resisting it or putting up a fight. By resisting, we mean doing the utmost to shut it out, frantically distract, self-medicate, or seek immediate reassurance. Unfortunately, when we do this, it suggests that the amygdala, that the anxious response itself is something to be feared and fought against. The amygdala gets confused and thinks that we need help against the threat, so releases more of the adrenaline and cortisol that we are trying to avoid. The first thing to do is simply acknowledge that this is a threat response. The sympathetic nervous system is stressed, and only the amygdala my amygdala has just released some adrenaline just in case I'm not okay. Of course, we know that anxiety attacks can't hurt us, but the amygdala doesn't care and will provide that extra fuel of energy just in case. As we stated before, this always passes. Adrenaline always passes. It makes no sense to resist and fight these sensations caused by adrenaline. They will pass on their own and they cannot hurt you. The rapid what if thoughts are just your anxious mind suggesting to you potential reasons why you might be afraid. Just remember 3 components of anxiety are natural, safe, and cannot harm you. Importantly, there is also nothing to fix or work out. Obviously, seeking help for anxiety and talking things through are always beneficial, but trying to work an anxiety attack just feeds the cycle more. It tells the amygdala that, wow, this is a problem and needs to be worked out because it's broken. Unfortunately, the amygdala also interprets this as danger. Ultimately, when you're anxious, don't you dare stop what you're originally doing. If you stop, change your behavior, and avoid and withdrawal because of it, then you're just going to reenact the same cycle of worry. Instead, reframe an anxiety attack as a time to practice the anxiety and practice with willful tolerance. If you get hit by an adrenaline dump, the most weird and wonderful suggestion we give you is you don't have to do anything. Josh's magic rule he wants on a place card in his office is do what non-anxious you would do. By not reacting, by continuing to what you were originally doing, despite the components of anxiety making us feel scared, uncomfortable, or doubtful, we are sending an extremely strong message to the amygdala, the conductor of the response, that I would like you to turn this response off, and as soon as I can, and also in the future, it isn't needed now, and I'll show you that it isn't needed. I no longer fear this response and can show my brain I can continue to live life even with it there. This is just adrenaline. I've got this. This is just adrenaline. There are a few other tips and tricks in the next section, but in general, the main message is that you don't really have to do anything. Less doing, more being. We both recovered from anxiety because we built up enough knowledge and confidence to be able not to react to anxiety when it arose. The more and more we did this, the better our confidence became, and the more we convinced the amygdala to stop releasing copious amounts of adrenaline in response to a trigger. We will share some of our personal tips in the next chapter. Allow the body to regulate itself. When Josh is sitting in his office opposite a client experiencing an anxiety attack or a rush of adrenaline, as we are now going to reframe it, the client might look over to their supportive therapist and receive an unexpected response as Josh simply shrugs his shoulders in plain indifference. To be sure, it's not what they expected, but Josh is not cruel. He does this for a very good reason. Josh: in my practice, when someone is having an anxiety attack, I don't really suggest anything because by reacting to anxiety, you're implying that it's dangerous. This is really important because we are about to discuss your body does a magnificent job of bringing you back to a state of equilibrium following a panic attack. Understand that people have a reactional response to panic attacks as though the panic attack itself is what needs addressing. However, panic attacks occur as a result of prolonged stress. And with this knowledge, we've come to understand that the best thing we can do is do nothing. It feels entirely counterintuitive and will go against every feeling in your body that is telling you to respond and save yourself, as the nausea in your stomach kicks in and your chest tightens. But here's the thing: when the amygdala sees that you're doing as little as possible, it will realize that panic itself is nothing to be scared of. This is why some people can experience a panic attack and then go back to work, while others are so scared of the panic attack that it inhibits their ability to continue on with their day. We forget this. By not reacting to the threat response when we are not in fact in any immediate danger, we are telling it to turn off. The reason Josh shrugs his shoulders when his clients panic is because neither he nor they need to do anything. Josh is not panicking about his clients. He's calm. Nothing bad is going to happen. And in no less than 20 minutes, the clients are often completely fine because together they have shown their threat response that there is no reason to panic. The best thing you can do is not respond. Simply do nothing. It doesn't matter how anxious we get, our bodies have an outstanding ability to always bring us back to that state of balance. The body regulates itself so that you don't have to. When you come out of the other side of the panic attack, it wasn't because you used this technique or you were lucky or you just managed to survive. It doesn't matter where you are or what you are doing. It is the body that has stabilized you. The body will always find a way to calm you down and bring you back to a harmonious state. Eventually, the adrenaline and cortisol will run out and the nervous system will intervene, finding stability and bringing you back to normality. Take this information to be a reassurance because the same control that you are scared of losing is the same lack of control that will bring you back to balance. However, it is entirely understandable to want to help yourself in the midst of an anxiety attack. So, if at all possible, you should do your best to do absolutely nothing and show the threat response that it is not needed. But if your anxiety attack is particularly acute and you need to do something to bring yourself into the present, then we have some exercises that might help you. Understand that these should not be used as tools to fix the problem. merely an aid to tolerating an anxiety attack. Our first tool is something called a grounding technique. This is a very common technique that therapists and trauma therapists use with their clients. A grounding technique can be used in a variety of ways, and with the first method, we encourage you to stop, take a moment, and try the best to identify 5 things you can see, 5 things you can hear, 5 things you can feel. Now you can always hear 5 different sounds, whether that be your heartbeat, the wind, a neighbor, the creaking of a floorboard, cars driving past, someone's music, the birds in the sky, or even a running shower. When we think about identifying things that we can feel, these things include things like temperature, clothes on your skin, the chair under your bottom, the socks on your feet, or the rug beneath your bare toes. Once you've identified 5 things, move on to 4, then move on to 3, then move 2, then finally 1. One of our favorite grounding techniques is to look around, say what we see, and then think of 2 descriptive adjectives that we could use to describe our chosen object. For example, you might be walking through the park and you say what you see. I see a tree. With this technique, however, we find those 2 descriptive adjectives and think instead, I see an old oak tree. Another example, I see a car, becomes I see a rusty vintage looking car. The trick is to focus on the details of the object and describe it in a greater depth. This helps to root us firmly in the present. It is worth caveating this technique with something really important. This is really difficult to do. It is not easy and it's not supposed to be. Regardless, you can attempt to do it anyway. The reason being that the threat response will register that you're ignoring it and that you're trying to do something in the present. By focusing on staying grounded in the present, we can more easily ignore the threat response, which will help us to turn it off than it isn't needed. So that's 2 of our favorite grounding techniques. Let's move on to the seemingly controversial topic of the breath. A lot of yogis around the world will teach you to focus on the breath. And while that can be incredibly helpful for many in practicing mindfulness, etc., for some, concentrating on their breath during an anxiety attack isn't actually helpful. On the contrary, it could have the opposite effect to the desired one. When faced with a wise old yogi who would calmly reinforce that we should follow their guidance and focus on the breath, an anxiety sufferer may well feel the urge to scream at them. No, I have a panic disorder. Why would I focus on my breath? If I focus on how terrible I'm breathing is when I'm really aware of how terrible I'm breathing is. It's only going to make me panic more. So no, I won't focus on my breath. Thank you. The truth of the matter is that asking someone to concentrate on their breath in the middle of a panic attack is considered the go-to advice, but in a likelihood, it could exacerbate the problem. With that said, if concentrating on your breath doesn't add any secondary fear, then we have a breathing technique that you can try. The technique is very simple. Put one hand on your belly and push your belly out with every inhale. This is exactly how we are supposed to breathe. If you notice babies when they sleep, you can see their stomachs rise and fall, and this is because their breath goes into their bellies. You can watch as their little round tummies go up and down, up and down. However, thanks to social conditioning, we breathe in our chest because it is not considered socially acceptable to walk around with anything other than flat washboard abs. So we don't like to breathe how nature intended because that would mean allowing our gut to hang out. And apparently, people don't want to see that. If you decide to give this belly breathing exercise a go, there is no specific amount of time that you should be breathing for, but just make sure that your out breath is 1 second longer than your in breath. By doing this, you're exhaling more carbon dioxide and taking in less oxygen, which brings everything back to balance. Belly breathing over time will trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest response, which allows us to remain calm and in control. Let's get one thing straight. Do not take 3 deep belly breaths and check to see if your anxiety is gone. That's not going to work. It's an exercise that can encourage the response over time to, once again, this is not a fix, but simply a tool to help you tolerate an anxiety attack. Ultimately, it's a case of trusting your body to do its job. The body will always regulate itself. No matter what state of panic you find yourself in, eventually the adrenaline will run out and your body will restore itself to its natural balance. Whilst you can use these coping exercises above, you might trust that your body knows what it's doing. It knows how to handle itself, and it knows how to bring things back to a state of equilibrium. Even when you feel out of control, your body is fully in control. In conversation. Josh. I'm drawing from a personal experience here. I remember when I got really confident with panic attacks or anxiety attacks, or as we all like to call them, adrenaline rushes, I used to just say 3 things to myself. Not as a magic spell to get rid of anxiety, but just as reassurance for myself. This is just adrenaline and this is just anxiety. It will pass and you can cope. I used to say that to myself and it was right every time. I didn't necessarily feel it every time. Because anxiety's main purpose is to make you doubt. Okay, my mind's rushing, my heart's pounding, I don't feel here, I feel detached. Alright, well, this must be adrenaline. This must be my anxious response. Let's go for it. And then I would basically say to myself, what would I usually be doing right now? Then I would go and commit my attention to that instead because I need to teach my amygdala, my anxious brain, there's no danger here and I'm going to show it. The first time I did this, I was proud because it's very hard and then it gets easier and easier and easier. What advice would you give for an anxiety attack? Dean. So, just going back to the situation at the office, looking back, I didn't really take any time away from the situation, even in the middle of the panic attack. I did, however, take some time off to help with the grieving of my father. But when I went back into work, I was still in the center of a panic disorder. So, I was waking up and accepting the anxiety and panic every day. I'd wake up, put my watch on, and be like, yep, here's 9 hours in work. What's anxiety going to bring me today? Like you said, labeling anxiety for what it is really important. It's really useful. And when I was first in the office, what I'd do, I'd always almost create a safety behavior of getting up out of my seat and running. I'll go into the toilet and try and compose myself. Yes, again, initially it would help because I would do like breathing techniques and reduce the anxiety. But what would happen is I'd go back into the office and I'd get the response again. The reason is because I'm using a safety behavior and avoiding the anxiety, aren't I? I'm avoiding the situation. So what I did was sit with the anxiety. I sat with it. We know what it's going to throw at us. We know it's going to be uncomfortable. We know that it's even going to convince us that this time it's going to be different than last time. But we know from the evidence that every time it does go away. It is temporary. It isn't permanent. Josh. Brilliant. Yeah, I remember mine. It's not temporary, it's not permanent, and it's calling its bluff. Just calling its bluff was one. And also, nobody knows. But if you're angry, use this to your advantage and channel the anger towards that anxiety. I did that and it really helped, But anger gets a lot of bad press, You shouldn't be angry. No, use the anger. Use it for exposure, and I think it can be really helpful. But as a big one is when someone said to me, the body will always regulate itself. It's not a fantastic ability to regulate itself and bring you back to balance. It's got a fantastic ability to regulate itself and bring you back to balance. And to trust it too. It's clever. Your body does not want to maintain this anxiety. So yeah, it's going to regulate itself, and that's something that stuck with me to this day. Dean. That's brilliant, and I think it's just worth knowing the difference. You can have a panic attack which sometimes is called an anxiety attack, but there are differences between types of anxiety that people might get during the day, either like a gradual buildup to a full-blown fight or flight or freeze situation, where it's a complete adrenaline flood.